Mr. Gardner here. I just wanted to do a quick lesson with you guys about all of our operations when using integers. Integers are just our positive and negative whole numbers that we'll be using in math. So the first thing we want to talk about is adding integers. When we're adding integers, pretty simple rules to follow. If you're adding two positive numbers, then your outcome is going to be positive. If you're adding two negative numbers together, your outcome is going to be negative. If you're adding together a big positive number and a smaller negative number, then of course your outcome is going to be positive. And if you're adding a small positive with a big negative, then your outcome is going to be negative. And we'll talk about how to use this with a few examples in just a moment here. So like anything else, let's talk about just adding integers together. 2 plus 2. We know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And we can see this with a model. If I have 1, 2, and I add to that model 2 more, I can see that I have a total of 4 things. Okay, and that's really nice. And let's say we use negatives. Let's say -2, and we're adding -2 also to that. That case, we would get -4. Let's just use open circles as our negatives here. Right, and the same thing. I got 2 negatives. I got 2 more negatives. Together, I've got 4 negatives. Well, let's see what happens when we start adding things that have different signs. So 3 plus -2. Okay, so let's look at this. We got 3 positives, and we've got -2 negatives. And so if we think about that in the way we looked at it before, the bigger one is positive, the smaller one is negative, so our outcome should be positive. We should keep the sign of the bigger number. And you can think about that with our 0 pairs here. I've got 1, 2, 3 positives. I've got 2 negatives, and we know a positive and a negative makes 0, and I'm left with +1. Alright, so that shows us there. The same thing we can do is we could just subtract them. 3 minus 2 equals 1. Okay, because 3 plus -2 is the same thing as 3 minus 2. And we'll look at that in just a minute as well. And so again, we got 2 plus -4. So now I got a +2 and I've got a -4. And again, the 4 is bigger. The negative number is bigger. So we expect our result to be negative. And again, we can look at that model as 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can cancel out our 0 pairs, and I'm left with 2 negatives. So that's just simple addition. Now the nice thing is subtraction is not different. Subtraction is basically the same thing, right, as adding integers. Except that we just have to do a couple things to change it around. So let's say let's go back to our same problem. Let's say we had 3 minus -2 here. So it's kind of similar to this one, just a little bit different. What we could say here is if we're subtracting -2, it's the same thing as adding 2. Okay, and if we look at that here, we get 5. And that's because if we look at the model, what we're really looking at here is we have 1, 2, 3 positives, and we have to take away 2 negatives. The problem is I don't have any negatives here. So I have to build in some negatives by adding in some 0 pairs. So 1 0 pair, 2 0 pairs. Now I have negatives in my model, but they don't change the value of my model. You can see my model is 0 plus 0 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, which is 3, which is good. And now it told us with our original problem we had 3 minus -2. So now I could take away those 2 negative ones, and I'm left with 5 positives. The same thing here is when I changed it to plus a positive. Okay, so whenever we have subtraction, we really can just change the sign of subtraction and then change the sign of the second term. So let's say I had 4 minus 3. Well, this can become 4 plus -3. And again, you can look at the model. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. Eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. I'm left with 1, which is 1. Same thing as if I did it with the original 1, 2, 3, 4, and I took away 3 of them, 1, 2, 3 of them, I'm still left with 1. So you can see that you can just change subtraction to be addition of the opposite number. And so we've been calling this in class, keep, change, change. So for addition and subtraction, those are really nice ways to work with integers and then get the correct result and not getting some strange result. The other way you can combine these things in a model is by using our T-chart way, our system of using T-charts. So let me erase all this really fast, and we'll look at the T-chart method that we used in class. Again, for subtraction, we're changing to addition in this model. It's no different than what we did before. So again, this model works for addition. You just need to change your subtraction to addition. So let's say we have 5 minus 3. Okay, we changed it to plus plus. If we looked at our columns, our plus minus columns, we see again 5 plus negative 3. I've got a 5 and I've got a 3, and we know in our columns that we're just going to add up, and I get 8. So we know that that's 8. Alright, but now let's say we get something a little more difficult. Let's say it's negative 4 plus 2. Okay, so let's say we have negative 4 plus 2. Well, now we can look at it. We've got positive column and negative column. We put the negative 4 in that column. We really could just put 4. We put a 2 here. And now we look at them. Which one's bigger? This one's bigger because it's a 4. So we're going to move this one over, subtract it, and we're going to get 4 minus 2 equals 2. And we see that we're in the negative column, so that we know our result is negative 2. Just like we would see here that negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2 if I did it with the model we used earlier. 2 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives, cancel, cancel, and I'm left with the 2 negatives. Same thing is right here. So whichever system works better for you. If making the models work better for you, then do that. If using the T-chart works better for you, then do that. Just make sure that we're just changing subtraction to the addition of the opposite value. That's really the key there for doing those problems. The next thing I want to talk about is multiply and divide. Multiply and divide is actually really nice because there's just some simple rules to follow. Make sure I'm spelling things right here. Alright, when we multiply and divide, we have simple rules to follow. If we're multiplying two positives, then our result's always going to be positive. If we're multiplying two negatives, then our result is always going to be positive. If we're multiplying positive negative, we're going to get a negative. If we're doing positive negative or negative positive, we're going to get a negative. So the easy way to kind of remember is same sign equals positive. Opposite signs equal negatives. So that's a really easy way to remember your multiply divide rules. So if we have 3 times negative 2, that's what I got here. I got positive, negative, then my result is going to be negative 6. If I've got 8 divided by negative 2, again, I've got my positive negative rule going on here. My result's going to be negative 4. So this is really important when we're doing our one-step equations and we're looking at, dividing by the coefficient, and the coefficient might be negative, or the number we're dividing might be negative. Just making sure that our result comes out with the correct sign just by following these rules. Same signs, they're both positive, they're both negative, you're going to get a positive out. If they're different signs, if they're one's positive, one's negative, or vice versa, then you're always going to get out a negative result. So that's really important. So yeah, just follow those rules, and then you should be able to get the problem